Good morning, everybody. We're going to be reading out of Genesis 31, and we're really going to look at a passage that runs from chapter 30 into chapter 32. So I'm going to kind of tell you the story. It's written in story form. It's a narrative describing the life of Jacob, really. And so I'm going to share that with you that way so that you don't have to sit and listen to me read all of it. But I want to cover this large passage because it all ties together. It's all part of one big story. And we're going to look at the end and see kind of what observations we can pull from that, what principles we can pull from that text, and just what God is doing there. I need to confess to you before we start that my own preparation for this week was not what it should be. I don't tell you that as an excuse. I tell you that because I'm pretty excited at the moment. You guys don't really get to see this, but as we spend time, myself or Troy or Deidre or Kirsty, whoever's preparing for kind of the formal service, the singing and the sermon and whatever else may go into it, whether it's prayer or offering, those types of things. Sometimes we put a lot of effort into that, and sometimes we fail and don't put as much into it as we should. But it's still kind of our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own strategy, our own concepts. What can we do to make the service point to Christ and to make it to be a service that is enjoyable for everybody? And so my preparation this week fell short significantly. But just singing those songs together. Now, I have the benefit of living with the worship leader. It's my wife, so anybody take that wrong. And so you would think we'd be able to communicate those things, and sometimes we can't, and generally it's my fault. And so we didn't communicate that as well this week. And so last night she was finishing up the songs, and I didn't know what they were. And so then singing them together, there's themes in the music that we sang this morning that are all through the Scripture. There are themes that have been in my own mind as I've spent time with this passage. So I tell you that not as an excuse or a cop-out. I tell you that because God can do something far more greater than I can on my own. And to see Him at work in that, even though I felt like I had kind of screwed up, is pretty cool. And so I think we'll see that even a little bit in today's passage. We'll see God at work in ways that are beyond what we can imagine. We'll see the sovereignty of God at work in someone's life when they don't see that, when they don't feel that, when they don't understand that. So that's what we're going to look at today. So let's begin. Let me start with the story. I'm not going to give you a lot. If you're visiting with us, I'm not going to give you a lot to kind of catch up. There's a lot that's happened, but let me give it to you real brief. Take the book of Genesis. It's the first book of the Bible. You can divide it into two sections. Chapters 1 through 11 is the first section. Chapters 12 through 50 is the second section. It's kind of a big section. And there's a key passage in there in the first part of chapter 12 that kind of is the hinge point for the book. We see at the beginning, it's kind of the story of God and humanity, beginning with Adam. And then we see in the second section, it's the story of God and one family, the family of Abraham. And so we trace this family, we look at their storyline, we see how God works in their lives throughout the rest of the book of Genesis. It's a lot of chapters. We start with Abraham, and then to Isaac, his son, and then to Jacob, his grandson, who we're going to be looking at today. And then eventually we'll get kind of to Joseph. He'll be the main character for a while. So that's the big idea. That's what's happening. We're in the second section. We're looking at how God works, the story of God and this one family, the family of Abraham. Now, God made a covenant with Abraham, a promise to Abraham that He was going to bless him, that He was going to bless his family, that He was going to give him this particular land that He lays out the boundaries for, that He's going to bless all people through him, and that he's going to become a great nation. That out of him, it's going to become a great nation. Abraham didn't have any children at the time and doesn't have a child until he's 100 years old. So there's a lot of things that were going on there that were in play. This is the covenant that He makes with Abraham, and this covenant is passed down. It goes on to Isaac. God extends His covenant to Isaac. And then we see in chapter 28, God then extends it to Jacob. Now, Jacob was a twin. He was the second born of the twins. Esau was the one that came out first. And there's a lot of conflict that we've looked at, we've covered as we've discussed that. There's a lot of conflict that exists in families that we've discussed and looked at through this story. And Jacob, his name means deceiver. And so we looked at that. There was a lot of deception. Jacob deceived his brother and his father. He deceived his brother to get the birthright. He deceived them both to get his blessing, to get his father's blessing. Jacob wasn't really living in a way that exemplified trust in God. He was looking out for himself. He was going to do what was best for himself. And so these things happened. God had told Isaac and Rebekah that the younger, in fact, Jacob, was going to serve the older. And that the younger was going to be blessed. And so we see these things playing out, but playing out in a means that really aren't consistent with how God works. But nonetheless, we see God working that. And so Jacob deceives his family, and as a result, he has to leave. His mother and his father send him away to marry someone from their family line so that they're not marrying with these other cultures, these other people who don't worship the same God. So he sends him away so that his brother doesn't kill him, so he's not murdered. Jacob is taking everything from his brother, and his brother's mad, and he wants to fight. And so he goes away. Now, he goes away, he goes to the land of his grandfather, to his sister's brother, Laban. That's kind of where we're going to pick up. That's kind of present to where we're at today. Now, there's a lot of detail in there, there's a lot of things I left out, but that's the big picture. So Jacob is in Haran. He has traveled there to escape murder, to obey his mother's wishes, and to obey his father, specifically to look for a wife. Now he goes there and he finds a young lady that he thinks is very attractive. He asks for her hand in marriage. To do so, he's going to work for Laban. It's one of Laban's daughters. And he's going to work for Laban for 7 years. I'll work for you for 7 years for you to give your daughter to me. Now, I'm from Kentucky. Kind of the southern hospitality kind of thing. I don't know how everybody does it out here, but I was under the impression that I still needed to go to my father-in-law or future father-in-law and ask for my wife's hand in marriage. Now, many of you have seen my father-in-law. He's a large man, long hair, fully tatted up sleeves. And this was the most intimidating thing I ever done. I thought, if he gets mad and decides he doesn't like this, we may be moving furniture around his living room. I hope that's not the case, but it might be. But I sure didn't say, hey, I'd like to work for you for 7 years so that I can marry Deidre. Now, not to say that I wouldn't, but that's a big deal. He's committing this much of his life, not only to his wife or his future wife, but to his father-in-law. So they agreed to it. And the deceiver, Jacob, now becomes the deceived. So in the past, he's deceived his family. And now in this moment, he's going to be deceived. And so as he's awaiting his future wife, Rachel, to come into the marriage room so that they can consecrate the marriage, it's dark. Laban, the father, doesn't send in his youngest son, Rachel, who Jacob wanted. He sends in his oldest daughter, Leah. Now, can you imagine? Jacob is expecting Rachel. He's expecting this girl that he's worked for 7 years for. Now his father-in-law has given her to him in marriage. And he wakes up the next morning as the sun comes up, and then just turn on the lights, and the light starts creeping in. And he looks, and it's not Rachel. He didn't sleep with Rachel. Rachel was who he expected, it's who he wanted, it's who he desired, it's who he'd worked for. But he had not, in fact, just slept with Rachel. I don't really know how to communicate the shock that he would have experienced in that moment. I certainly don't know how to communicate it in any appropriate manner. But that's a big deal. So he's been deceived. Now he's married to Leah. He thought he was getting Rachel, now he's married to Leah. He didn't even really like Leah that much, but now he's got her. But he honors that, but he still desires Rachel. And so he goes back to Laban and says, I will work for you another 7 years to then have your younger daughter's hand in marriage. And so they make an agreement. And so now he has 2 wives. Now, this is an appropriate time for me to point out that much of what you read in the Old Testament is narrative. It's story. And not story like fake, it's just me telling the story of how I grew up, or you telling the story of your family. It's true, it's factual, these things happen, but it's just describing events as they unfold. Make sense? It's not a prescription to this is how you should live your life. So it's not saying that men should have 2 wives or multiple wives. Most men that are married would naturally understand that. Don't. My wife's not here, so right now, so I can say that. But it's saying this is what happened. This is how it unfolded. And so now he's given 14 years of his life to Laban for $2. And he's worked his tail off. He's tended the flock. He's taken care of his sheep and his goats. And it's hard work. And he's done it well. He's done it so that he can have the end result. He's committed and he's sacrificed so that he can have Rachel. And Leah also. During this time, they begin to have children. And then he has another child with Rachel. We see this at Genesis chapter 30, verse 25. It says, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so that I can return to my homeland. And he's been there 14 years. He's given him 14 years of his life. How many of you have lived in the same place your whole life? How many of you have lived in the same place for 14 years? It's a pretty good length of time. Deidre and I have lived in our home now for going on 7 years. And I moved a lot as a child growing up. I moved a lot. And 7 years is by far the longest I've ever lived anywhere. So to think about 14 years, working for a father-in-law, he's a tree man, he cuts trees. So he'd have me up in trees, trimming trees. But now he's ready to go home. So he asked his father-in-law, Laban, please let me go to my homeland. But Laban recognizes that he's been blessed through Jacob's work. He recognizes that God has blessed him as a result of Jacob being there. So he doesn't want that to happen. He doesn't want Jacob to leave. Not to mention, he probably is not ready for his daughters to go and his grandchildren to go. But selfishly, he knows that as a result of Jacob being there, it's like he's got free labor, and this guy's worked hard for me. He's taking care of my flocks. My flocks have increased, they've multiplied. And so he says, I don't want you to go yet. Name your wage and I'll pay it, and you stay here. Jacob kind of understands that something's at play here, I think. So he says, I don't want anything from you. Laban still wants the upper hand. If he has something to hold over Jacob, then he can keep you maybe another 7. Who knows? Jacob doesn't want that. He wants the opposite. So he says, I don't want any wages from you, but here's what I would do. From your flock, I'll take the spotted, the speckled goats and sheep. And those will be mine. And as those make and produce offspring, they'll produce other sheep and goats that are spotted or speckled or that have stripes. And so you'll be able to see that I'm not taking any of your flock. Now this is significant for a couple of reasons. One, I think, is specifically because the spot or the speckle kind of shows a blemish. They're the weaker, the unwanted. These are not the top of the line. They're not taking them to do a contest to see who has the best sheep. You don't want the spotted ones. You want the speckled ones. So he says, I'll take the weaker, I'll take the unwanted, and as they produce, those will be mine. And if there's any in my flock that are not spotted or speckled, you'll know that I've cheated you. And so it'll be a way for you to understand that I'm living up to my word. Laban quickly takes his sons, and he has his sons go get all the speckled and the spotted and the striped sheep and goats and remove them from the herd. He agreed to it. He said, yeah, Jacob, that sounds like a good idea. And he has his sons take it quickly and remove them. So when they go to examine it to look, there's not any there. So there's none that can even produce at this point. Now Jacob knows that God has promised that he's going to take care of him. That happened back in chapter 28. We'll look at it in a few minutes. And Jacob, this is a kind of an interesting and odd part of the story. He takes bark from poplar trees and from almond trees, and he pulls the bark back to where there's the white of the wood, and he lays it in the water troughs when the female sheep and goats come to drink. And he lays it in the water troughs, and I looked, and there's no verifiable scientific evidence of this type of breeding practice, that this works, which I think points even more to God's sovereignty, his hand at work in this. But he lays them in the water trough, and when those sheep and when those goats mate, the ones that have drank from this water and that are looking at this striped bark, this spotted bark almost, and they produce. Now these are sheep and goats that have no blemishes. They have no spots. There's no marks on them. And they drink water from this trough, and they see this branch that Jacob has laid in front of them. And when they look at that branch, for whatever reason, Jacob thought, well, they'll produce offspring that are speckled or spotted. I don't know why he thought that. It doesn't make any sense. But that's what he thought. And God blessed that. God honored that. And so what Jacob thought would happen is exactly what would happen. These sheep began to produce offspring with spots, or with stripes, or with speckles. And Laban sits back looking at this and has to be furious. I've removed all of the animals, all of the livestock that have blemishes. How now are these animals producing other animals that have blemishes? And so, what Jacob does is he only does this with the strongest. When the strongest come to drink, and they're going to mate, he takes those and he lays this branch in front of them. And so pretty quickly as they begin to reproduce, Jacob's flocks increase dramatically. Before long, Laban's sons can see that Jacob has somehow increased beyond the father. That their inheritance essentially is decreasing, and Jacob seems to be increasing, and so they're upset, they're angry, and Jacob recognizes this, and he sees that Laban has started to treat him differently, in fact. That it's not the same relationship that they once had. And so I want to read this. I want to pick up in chapter 31. Genesis chapter 31, verse 1. Now Jacob heard what Laban's sons were saying. Jacob has taken all that our fathers and all that was our father's, and has built his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob saw from Laban's face that his attitude toward him was not the same as before. The Lord said to him, this is Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. Jacob had Rachel and Leah called to the field where his flocks were. He said to them, I can see from your father's face that his attitude toward me is not the same as before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that with all my strength I have served your father, and that he has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God has not let him harm me. If he said the spotted sheep would be your wages, then all the sheep were born spotted. If he said the streaked sheep would be your wages, then all the sheep were born streaked. God has taken away your father's herds and given them to me. When the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the streaked, spotted, and speckled males were mating with the females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob. And I said, here I am. He said, look up and see. All the males that are mating with the flocks are streaked, spotted, and speckled, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you poured oil on the stone marker and made a solemn vow to me. Get up, leave this land, and return to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah answered him, do we have any portion or inheritance in our father's family? Are we not regarded by him as outsiders? For he has sold us, and has certainly been our purchase price. In fact, all the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our grandchildren. So do whatever God has said to you. As the story continues, Jacob gets up. He takes his wife, his children, his herds, and they leave and they take off. Laban is a few days away. He's shearing sheep. This is their chance. So they set out to go back to the land of Canaan. Pretty quickly, within a couple of days, I think 3 days, Laban hears the news. Jacob has taken your daughters and your grandchildren and all of his herds, and he's left. So Laban, being not happy about this, sets out to catch him. He does. They chase him down. And they get there, and Laban is upset. Well, before he gets there, Laban has an interaction with God in a dream. And God tells him, basically, leave Jacob alone. So they chase him down, and he's upset. And he begins to accuse Jacob of all kinds of things. Why have you done this? Why did you leave? Why did you not let me see my children or my grandchildren? Let's pick up in verse 25. When Laban overtook Jacob, Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban and his relatives also pitched their tents in the hill country of Gilead. Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me and taken my daughters away like prisoners of war. Why did you secretly flee from me, deceive me, and not tell me? I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and lyres, but you didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters. You've acted foolishly. I could do you great harm, but last night the God of your father said to me, watch yourself. Don't say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long for your father's family. But why have you stolen my gods?" Jacob answered, "I was afraid, for I thought you would take your daughters from me by force. If you find your gods with anyone here, he will not live. Before our relatives point out anything that is yours and take it." Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, Leah's tent, and the tents of the two concubines, but he found nothing. When he left Leah's tent, he went into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken Laban's household idols, put them in the saddlebag of the camel, and sat on them. Laban searched the whole tent, but found nothing. She said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So Laban searched, but could not find the household idols. So you get this picture in your head, this image in your head. Jacob's given 7 years for one daughter, 7 years for another. And he's worked for him for another 6. Jacob's given 20 years of his life at this point to Laban. 20 years. And he's finally left. He's finally free. He's fled. He's going home. God has delivered him. God has said, "Go back to your land. The land that I promised that you would return to." And now he's been chased down by his father-in-law. And his father-in-law is now complaining about some idols or some other things that he's accusing him of stealing. Now Jacob doesn't know that his wife Rachel actually took them. He thinks he's completely innocent in this. But he says, "Search, do all that you want." And he finds nothing. And Jacob has had enough. He's tired of it. He's fed up. You can understand this. Jacob has been abused. He's been disrespected. He's been lied to. Just in general, he's experienced maltreatment. His wages have never been consistent. He's essentially been stolen from. He's almost been enslaved to his father-in-law. And you kind of name it, and it's happened to Jacob over the course of these 20 years. He's endured a lot. Not anything actually crazy, but he's endured a lot. His circumstances were not what he wanted them to be. He wanted to have a better life. He wanted to be free of his father-in-law. He wanted to have his wife and his... Well, he wanted to have a wife, and he wound up with 2. He wanted to have his grandchildren and to his children and to have grandchildren and to be in a place where he was comfortable. But he's not had that. He's had long nights tending the sheep. days in the scorching sun in the desert. And he's just in general not where he wants to be. Now you can relate to that probably. There's been a time in your life, maybe right now, where you've just not been where you wanted to be. It just seemed like everything you did, somebody was taking advantage of it. Whether it was at work or it was in a family relationship, at school or at home, it just wasn't enough. You were hurting, you were in pain, and you wanted to be somewhere else. You wanted to be in a different circumstance in life. This is Jacob. His father-in-law's tracked him down, accused him of theft. Here's his response, verse 36. Then Jacob became incensed and brought charges against Laban. What is my crime, he said to Laban. What is my sin that you have pursued me? You searched all my possessions. Have you found anything of yours? Put it here before my relatives and yours, and let them decide between the two of us. I've been with you these 20 years. Your ewes and female goats have not miscarried, and I have not eaten the rams from your flock. I did not bring any of the flock torn by wild beasts. I myself bore the loss. You demanded payment from me for what was stolen by day or by night. There I was. The heat consumed me by day and the frost by night. Sleep fled from my eyes. For 20 years in your household I served you, 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks. And you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been with me, certainly now you would have sent me off empty-handed. But God has seen my affliction and my hard work, and he issued his verdict last night. Then Laban answered Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the sons my sons, the flocks my flocks. Everything you see is mine, but what can I do today for these daughters of mine or for the children they have borne? Laban's kind of realizes he doesn't have a leg to stand on. He says, come now, let's make a covenant, you and I. Let it be a witness between the two of us. So Jacob picked out a stone and set it up as a marker. Then Jacob said to his relatives, gather stones. They took stones and made a mound. Then they ate there by the mound. Laban named the mound Jair-Sahudutha, but Jacob named it Gilead. Then Laban said, the mound is a witness between you and me today. Therefore the place was called Gilead, and also Mizpah. For he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are out of each other's sight. If you mistreat my daughters or take other wives, and no one is with us, understand that God will be a witness between you and me. Laban also said to Jacob, look at this mound and the marker I have set up between you and me. This mound is a witness, and the marker is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this mound to you, and you will not pass beyond this mound to me, and this marker to do me harm. The God of Abraham and the gods of Nahor, the gods of their father, will judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. So they ate a meal and spent the night on the mountain. Laban got up early in the morning, kissed his grandchildren and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban left to return home. Jacob went on his way, and God's angels met him. When he saw them, Jacob said, this is God's camp. So he called that place Mahanaim. Jacob has endured a great deal. He's hurt. Oxford Dictionary defines suffering as a state of enduring pain, distress, harm. And I think Jacob certainly would meet that definition. He has endured these things. For 20 years, he's endured distress. He's endured hardship at the hands of his father-in-law. And I think this is something that we all relate to. Now, suffering takes on many forms. It varies in intensity. Suffering for you may not be suffering for me. Vice versa. Sometimes it may be light, but it's sustained, and other times it's intense, but brief, and everything on the spectrum in between. Also with suffering, we need to know that at times it's a result of external factors or consequences that we don't have any control of. A natural disaster. For children, it may be the consequences of the decisions their parents made that they had no control of. It's brought harm and distress, hardship and pain. Maybe a health issue that really there was nothing that you could do about. And this has brought some type of suffering into your life. Other times it's a result of our own poor decisions, even our own sinful decisions. In fact, in the story today, I think you see a result of both. Jacob is experiencing distress, he's experiencing hardship at the hands of his father-in-law. And in some ways, there's nothing that he can do about that. He can't really control that. On the other hand, Jacob is there in the first place because of his own sinful decisions. His own decisions to deceive his brother and his father. And so you see the two factoring together to bring this weight to Jacob that he's endured for this season, for 20 years. The reality is no one escapes suffering. Why? Because of sin. Sin has infected and affected every component of our lives, to include all of creation. Sin has distorted God's good design. It's infiltrated every recess of your heart and mind. And as a result, we endure varying levels of pain, distress. We find ourselves in uncomfortable situations, experiencing hardship from one season to the next. And that all sounds pretty depressing, honestly. But I want to offer a few encouragements this morning. Specifically that we begin with, that we see from this story, from Jacob and from this passage. No matter how much you're hurting, no matter what state of pain you're in or how much distress you've experienced, no matter the conflict in your home or the conflict at work, or the relational pain that you experience with friends or family, God sees that. God sees that. None of it is beyond God's sight. If you go back to chapter 31, verse 10, it says, when the flocks were breeding, I saw in a dream that the streaked, spotted, and speckled males were mating with the females. In that dream, the angel of God said to me, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, look up and see. All the males that are mating with the flocks are streaked, spotted, and speckled. For I have seen. This is God speaking. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I have seen that. I am the God of Bethel, where you poured oil on the stone marker and made a solemn vow to me. Get up, leave this land, and return to your native land. God sees it. He reminds Jacob that he sees him. I know what you've experienced, Jacob. And then he reminds him of who he is. Now, as believers, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we have amnesia a lot, I think. We forget exactly who God is, and how He moves, and how He acts, and how He loves us. When life gets difficult, we just it all just goes blank. So we need to remind ourselves of that often, of who God is. So God reminds Jacob of who He is. I see you, Jacob. I'm the God of Bethel. Now, why is this significant? Turn back to chapter 28, verse 10. To remind you of it. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. Now he's left home and he's off. He's fleeing his brother. He took one of the stones from the place, he put it there under his head, and lay down in that place, and he dreamed. A stairway was set on the ground with its top reaching the sky, and God's angels were going up and down on it. The Lord was standing there beside him, saying, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your offspring the land on which you are lying. Your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out toward the west, the east, the north, and the south. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you, and will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. God said, Jacob, I see you. I know that you're hurting. I know that these 20 years have been tough. Do you remember that place, that time at Bethel where you made a vow to me, where you poured out the oil? Now, this was a physical location that would have been a reminder, a marker, this place at Bethel that stuck out in Jacob's mind. This was a moment that if you continue reading that Jacob really gave his life to God. He began to trust in God. God had made this promise to him, and he says, God, if that's what you're telling me, I believe that. And so he remembered that. Now, sometimes we don't have particular places, physical locations, but at the same time we do. If you're a believer, if you're a follower of Christ, there was a moment in time, there was a point in your life, there was a marker, there was a stone pillar where you confessed your sins to God, where you repented, and where you turned to God. God has reminded Jacob of that. For you and I, as we experience difficulties, as we go through life, and it's hard at times, and we go through seasons of suffering, God is saying, listen, here I am. Jacob, I see what's happening to you. Do you remember this time? Do you remember what that was like when you made that commitment to me? Do you remember that moment of salvation, of forgiveness of sins, where you were brought into my family? So I think it's important for us to remember that, to recall that, to be reminded of that, of who God is, and to be reminded of the time to where we trusted our life to God. God sees and He hears and He rules over all things. And it's easy to forget that, but we must be reminded. We need to be reminded of who He is, what He's like. We need to be reminded of His love for us. Now, kind of the next logical question is, if God sees and God hears, then why do we have to endure such circumstances? Just why? Before we get to that, I want to answer a different question that I think will lead to it. I want to answer this question. Why or how was Jacob able to endure for so long? 20 years is a long time. Some of you aren't yet 20 years old. Some of you are 20 times 2 or 3. 20 years is a long time. It was a long time for Jacob to be in a place that he didn't want to be. Doing things that he didn't want to do. Being treated ways that he didn't want to be treated. I remember when I was younger, I was an adult, kind of. Legally, I was an adult, and I was probably pretty immature. And I had a job that I just didn't like. I've had a few jobs I didn't like, but I was in this job, and I just couldn't handle it. I woke up every day, and I was just sick to my stomach almost. Nauseous. If I've got to walk in this place one more time, I'm going to hurt somebody. I can't take it anymore. All I wanted, all that I thought about was getting out of that job. I look at it now and I think it wasn't really that bad. But there's a chance you've been in a position similar to that, whether it was a job or a relationship, to where it consumes your thoughts. And it brings about such pain that there is a visceral response, that you feel it in your stomach. When you talk about it, it brings tears to your eyes. And it hurts. So how did Jacob endure that for 20 years? a long time. And I think the answer is pretty simple, really. Is that Jacob trusted God. Jacob trusted that God was going to do what he said he was going to do. We just looked at it in chapter 28. God had extended this covenant to Jacob. The same promise that he made to his grandfather Abraham has made it to him as well. And so, God, you're God of all creation, of all things, and you've promised me that you're going to return me to this land, that you're going to bless me. Well, I don't think that's what is happening right now, but I'm going to stay here until you tell me otherwise. Because I trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. It gave him the ability to be steadfast in the face of suffering. So then I asked this question to a few people this morning. So are there promises in Scripture, are there passages of Scripture that, as believers, that you hold fast to? Are there other places where Jesus spoke that you can read and that you can take that into your own life and know that He's going to do what He said He's going to do? Those passages that you hold on to when life is just, you're at your limits. You can't take another day. You can't take another moment. Where do you turn? Let me give you some that were listed. John 3:16, this is an easy one to remember. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him will not perish but have everlasting life. If you believe in Jesus, that God loved you so much that if you believe in His Son Jesus, that you won't spend eternity separated from God, but that you'll spend eternity in heaven in His presence. What a promise. But there's nothing else that can do that except for His Son Jesus. This is kind of like God reminding Jacob, do you remember when you made that vow to me, when you made that commitment at that pillar in Bethel? Do you remember as a believer when you made that commitment to God, when God gripped your life and gripped your heart, there was nothing that you could do but surrender your life to Him? When you recognized that apart from Him that there was nothing, that sin had so distorted your life and distorted your ability to relate to God, that there was nothing that you could do about it, that you heard this verse or a verse like this, or you heard a preacher sharing a passage or a message that God loves you so much that He died for you. That if you'll believe in Him, if you'll trust Him, if you'll trust Him to do what He says that He'll do, that you'll spend eternity in His presence. That you won't be condemned to hell. That you won't pay the penalty of your own sin. And that's a promise to remember. John 14:3 says, Jesus says, if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me. Romans 8:28, for I just lost it. Tell me, it was yours. Ayla, did you look it up? Wake up. Romans 8:28. Somebody help me out. And completely blank. You got to be louder.
You know that all things work together.
All things work together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His name. That God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His will. Now, what a promise to remember. I bet Jacob would have liked to have had that. As he spends 20 years in a foreign land, with people he doesn't know, doing things he doesn't want to do. He doesn't see or know that God is working these things out together for his good in that moment. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Matthew 6, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Philippians 4, 6, and 7, don't be anxious. I don't know where you're at in life right now. Some of you I do. But even then, I don't know what's rattling around in your mind on a daily basis. I don't know what you walked into this room with this morning in your heart. For some of you, maybe God's going to remove you out of the circumstances. Maybe not tomorrow. Hopefully before 20 years. But maybe not. That's not necessarily one of the promises. Because here's the deal. This is something else that Jesus said. He said, if you want to follow me, you have to take up your cross. Take up your cross and follow me daily. Is there a more vivid image of suffering than the cross? Can you think of a picture of anything else that expresses suffering more than the cross? I can't. Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you have to take up your cross daily. God doesn't promise to remove us from suffering. He doesn't promise to remove us from hardship or distress. But one of the other promises, I think, is that we have joy, unspeakable joy that's found in Christ, that we can endure based on God's promises, that He loves us, that He cares enough for us, that He would send His Son to die for us. Pain may tarry for the night, but joy comes in the morning. God may not remove your hurt today. He may not remove it tomorrow. In the end, He will. If you've put your trust in Him, He says, if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again. He may not remove it this side of heaven. But that doesn't change who He is. It doesn't change His promises. It doesn't change that He loves you. All we're trying to do is to avoid suffering and to avoid hardship. I'm afraid we're never going to reach that. But if Philippians 3:10, if my goal is to know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings, being conformed to His death, assuming that I will somehow reach the resurrection from among the dead. If my goal is to know Him more and to know the power of His resurrection and to fellowship in His sufferings, then my circumstances don't matter. Jacob didn't hurt any less. His circumstances weren't removed, at least not for 20 years. It doesn't mean that the real things that happen in my life won't cause me pain. But what it means is that I can still experience joy through that pain. That I can experience unspeakable joy. The songs that we sing, that if the Son sets you free, that you're free indeed. Jacob was enslaved essentially to his father-in-law, but he was free. You might find yourself in a horrible situation. You think, I don't think I can take another day off, but you can. You can because of who God is. Not because you're determined. Because you work hard. Because you're going to get over it. But you can because of God. Because of who He is. As a follower of Christ, as someone who has confessed that Jesus is the Lord of all creation. It's not ever by your own mind. It's not ever by your own righteousness. It's not ever by your own merit. It's not by your own skill set. It's not by your own determination. Your joy is in Christ. It's in Him. We have the ability, unlike I think the rest of humanity, to go through this life, to experience difficulties in this life, in a manner that sets us apart from everyone else. Because we have a hope in Jesus. Without that, man, life is tough. But with it, my goal is to know Him more and to fellowship in His suffering and bring it on. Bring it on. I can be more like Christ as a result of this experience of my life. Yes. I can draw near to Christ, the one who saved me, because of this trouble that I'm facing. Yes. I can be shaped more into the image of His Son because of the difficulty, because of the relational conflict that I've experienced with my wife or with my parents or with my children or with my grandchildren or with brothers or sisters, that because of that, because of my aunts and uncles, that I can experience that. There's nothing that I can do about it except for draw near to Christ and be made more into the image of His Son Jesus because He loves me. Yes. There's great joy to be found in that. Jacob endured a great deal. I think the lesson for us is that we can as well. If we hold fast to God's promises, if we really trust that God is going to do what He says He'll do. So then that's the question. Where you're at right now, the things that you have going in your life today, tomorrow, this week, do you trust God to do what He says He'll do? Do you trust God enough to endure that, or do you need to go change your own circumstances? Do you need to flee, or do you need to just deny Him altogether? Can you trust that God is at work? My prayer is that you can trust that God is working in the midst of difficult situations. That He'll deliver you either now or in the life to come. Let's pray. God, thank you for who you are. Move in our hearts this very moment. God, strengthen us. Encourage us. Undergird us with your word. In your name that we pray. Amen. We're going to sing one last song with you guys and stand with us. If you need to respond to God in any particular way this morning, you're welcome to pray at the altar up front. If you'd like somebody to pray with you, myself and Troy would love to do that. Just pray that you would respond to God today.